Welcome back to the Obi-Wan channel. I want to talk to you guys now about something that I'm doing here that is a little bit different. I haven't really found anybody doing something like this online necessarily. I'm pretty sure maybe it's out there, but nonetheless, I don't know. I'm going to try to build this engine here for my Mustang right here. That's the 5.0 roller block right there, and it's just in there to kind of, fit it in there and hold the transmission up basically at the moment. But I'm actually now starting to build an engine. And when I say build, this wasn't the plan. The plan is that a friend of mine had a 1969, a C9 engine, and it was in a 1967 F100. And it was running. We drove it into the garage and we pulled that engine out and we stuck it underneath the bench, and we left it there because we left the distributor in, we left the spark plug wires hooked up, the 2-barrel carburetor on it, everything. We were going to just leave it alone. I was going to grab it. I was going to swap it into the vehicle here just to where I could get this thing running to back it in and out and turn it around and all that kind of stuff. And that was the whole purpose. So I went ahead and actually took that engine, brought it over here, and I started looking at it. I pulled the oil pan off just to take a quick look. And on that particular engine, what I ended up finding was everything was shot. I mean, it was shot, man. I mean, it had the biggest, deepest ring ridge I've ever seen, over 40 thousandths. I did end up taking the heads off, the cam and lifters. I pulled a couple lifters out. They were getting sharp edges. It was really, really wore out. The heads, the exhaust ports were sinking in the head. The exhaust valves, I should say. So it was looking really bad, and I decided, you know what, never mind, not gonna do this. So I said to my buddy, hey, what else you got? And lo and behold, this is the next thing that we came up with. So he said that, as you can see here, you'll see right over here, you can see that it's kind of painted green inside there. I think you can see it, and there's painted green inside there, and it has like a rebuild tag sitting right there, and then there's stampings all over this thing to indicate that this thing has been at some remanufacturing plant or something of that nature. But anyway, what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a Junkyard Dawg as much as possible, and this is a C8 AE, I believe it is. Yeah, C8OE, sorry. Block, 68 block. And when I took it apart, or when he took it apart, rather, it is bored 60 over, and it's in pretty good shape, actually. Hardly any ring ridge on it at all. Now, of course, I've honed it here a little bit, but when he took it apart, there was an indication of where it stopped as far as the ring travel, but there was nothing you could really grab your fingernail on. I mean, it was so minimal, if anything at all, actually. So he got it apart, and he just kind of left it there, and he didn't really know what really to do about it. The other thing I should mention is that it was a 289. It had a 1M crank in it, so that is a 289 crank, and it had the 5.155 longer rods and some dish pistons on there. As a matter of fact, right over here is where they are. So here we go. So these are the C3 rods. These are the 5.155 long, and as you can see, they got a dish in it, and the rings are really strong. I mean, again, I don't think this engine was run very long, and I will explain that here in just a minute. The pistons look actually pretty good, actually, too. So, but anyway, so I wanted to do a Junkyard Dawg, basically what I call it, right? And so this is the engine that I chose to go with. I could have put it back together again at the 289 and been done with it, but I didn't do that. I really want the extra stroke of the 302, and so that I have some 302 cranks. This is where the Junkyard Dawg comes into play because it is junkyard engine, basically. And here, I'll show you some pictures here. Get this worked up. So here is get this technology to work here. There we go. These are the crankshafts right here. Look at that. See how they got a little bit of rust on them? Yeah. Okay, well, what I did was I took them to the bead blaster. And this is what they look like after I go through the bead blaster. Okay, this was actually the worst one. The one I ended up putting in there over here was the better one. This one here is a 2M. Let's see where's that at. It's a 2MA crank, and it has 10,000 main and 10,000 rods already. But it did have rust on it, right? And I put it through the bead blaster, and then I've kind of done a home micro polish job, and you can see it's got a little bit of, it's not perfect, right? But this is, trust me, I do not normally do this. I have, extensive background in machine shop welding. Pretty much every building except for one other one I have built, by putting brand new crank in it, new bearings, etc., etc. This is going to be like the second time that I'm building an engine like this, okay, junkyard style, right? So let's take a look at this here. And by the way, this is a fixture that I built myself. This is about 1.5" by 3/8 plate. And I welded these bearings here that I found online at a surplus shop in eBay, right? So on eBay, they were selling these things cheap, and I think this is 1 3/8 if I remember correctly, the bearing inner diameter sizes. And so this is a double roller here, and this is a single taper lock, and I actually dropped the taper lock. I have no idea where it's at right now, but it doesn't really matter. But anyway, this allows me to spin this around, right? And kind of, work on the crank however I want, so on and so forth. But I put these cranks inside the bead blasting cabinet, blasted them both, and this is what they look like when they're done, right? Okay, built this little jig here, and what I end up doing is I put the crank bolt inside there, and then I take my 18-volt drill right here and put it on there, and I can spin that thing. And then when I do that, I take emery cloth here, or some sort of sandpaper cloth. I don't remember what this is. This is at least, I think, 120. It might be 180 grit, and I have this thing spinning with my drill, okay? And I actually micro polish what would be the main journals in this fixture, okay? And then I'm also, I kind of use the grinder a little bit to die grind off all the sharp edges, etc. That's just me being kind of anal, I guess, but it's not necessary. You don't have to do that. And okay, so you do that. Then after I do that, because it's kind of hard to sit here and sand on this while it's hanging off like that, I actually put it inside the block to micro polish in here. So I do the same thing. I basically micro polish the mains over there, then I bring the crank over here in the block, tighten it down, and then I go ahead and put same thing, electric drill right here, spin this thing around, and use the emery cloth here. And I'm sitting there, just it's kind of pulling on you as the crank, throws go around, etc. Right? And then you get it all as good as it's gonna get. Again, you can see that there's still, little nicks and gouges and rust pitting and that kind of stuff. These here, as long as I don't feel them and it's nice and smooth, I'm going to run it. This is why I'm calling it the Junkyard Dawg, because again, normally I'm going to take and put a new crank in. I'm going to go have it turned or whatever. That's normally what I'm going to do, but in this case, I'm not. I'm just going to, go ahead and run it as it is, and we'll just see what happens. Here's a good example. This is that bad crank, actually. This is all standard sizes here. This one hasn't been ground under yet. And as you can see there's really bad pitting on this one. This one will not micro polish near as smooth as that one over there did, which is why I'm using that one. And I've decided that, yeah, I might be using this later, but when I do use it later, I'm definitely going to be turning this one 10 under on this one. So that's why that one's kind of just sitting over here right now, just to kind of show you what it looks like after you bead blast it and whatnot. But I'm definitely going to be turning that 10 under in order to use that crank if I ever use it. But as of right now, I got the rust off of it, so that way it'll stop rusting, okay, so it won't get any worse. And then eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray it down like I did this one. This one here, I sprayed the AMSOIL Heavy Duty Metal Protector on there, which, by the way, you can go online at amsoil.com and you can buy that. Use reference number 1086626. That's 1086626. That'll be for me. And anyway, I use that AMSOIL Heavy Duty Metal Protector to keep it from rusting, okay? And, oh yeah, there's that 289 crank right back there. And then there's another 302 crank. Actually, that crank right there is the one that came out of that 69 that was really wore out. You can't really quite see it in the camera here, I don't think, but those are really grooved pretty good. And that one there is going to also need to be ground undersize in order to get rid of all those grooves. Now this, again, after I bead blasted it, got rid of the rust, and then micro polished it here inside this block, it smoothed up really well. Again, you can see little pits and whatnot, but it feels really smooth, so I'm just going to take a chance that it's going to work. One other thing you should also know is that the bearings, main bearings that are in here, and the rod bearings I'm planning on using are actually used bearings, okay? When I say they're used, they're in an engine that had less than 15,000 miles on it. It's not very old. In fact, I can show you one piston right here. So this is the piston. These are 30 over forged pistons here for a 302, and you can see I polished the beams and I put ARP rod bolts in it, but you can kind of see here that these bearings look pretty decent, and again, because it's going to be a Junkyard Dawg, this is what I'm going to end up using, and I'm going to end up using those 10 undersized bearings. And you can see right here that I actually plastic gauge that particular bearing in there, and we're at 2/1000 of clearance. So I actually plastic gauged all of the mains, and they're at 2/1000 clearance. And I did just one rod. I'm going to do every single rod, though, just to make certain. But so far, that one right there, just to see if that would even work, turned out to be 2/1000 clearance. And I was reading in the performance book that you want about 2 to 2.5 on your mains for a performance application, and you want about 2 to 3,000 on your rod for performance applications. And as you can see here, this thing here just really spins very, very, very freely. So yeah, it's going to be a loosey-goosey, I guess you might say. But that's what I'm trying to go after. So one other thing to bring up really quick about this block here, why I would consider it a Junkyard Dawg. And remember when I was telling you about the fact that this thing was it was barely used, right? Well, guess what? I think that it went to the rebuilder. Look at that. That's the timing cover. See how that water jacket was completely filled up and plugged? Yeah, right there. Okay. Well, the entire, I believe it was the passenger side, the entire passenger side was completely packed with like rust. And I really believe what happened was is that they put a 60 over, um, you know, 302, or I'm sorry, 289 into a vehicle, and they did not flush the radiator system, and then they went ahead and they ran it, and I think what happened was all that junk in there got inside the block, and it plugged up the one side of the block, as well as you saw the timing cover in those pictures. And I bet it was overheating, and I bet they pulled the engine at that point, basically kind of saying, well, it's 60 over, it overheats, because you kind of hear that a lot. I hear it a lot, that you can't do 60 over because it'll overheat. And I've had 60 over 302s, by the way, and I've never had a problem. I do notice that they heat up faster. I will say that, from cold start to full operating temperature, but I've never had a problem keeping them cool as long as you had a good radiator and a good cooling system. So I don't know how much old wives' tale that is, but basically I think that was the case in this situation where, like I said, it got all plugged up and it couldn't get cooled off, so they yanked it out, and I think that's the reason why it was in such good shape as far as like very, very little use. The cam was in great shape. Oh, and I do remember in the passenger side over here on the thrust side, I remember seeing hot spots. Like, how the metal will turn kind of bluish. I seen some hot spots there. So, but yeah, this whole area inside here was completely, just completely filled up. The spaces in between the cylinder sleeves was completely plugged up. I had to take a screwdriver and stab in there everywhere. It took me like a day. Plus I have I have a Hotzi pressure washer that I used as well, and that helped quite a bit. But it took a long time to get all that clean out. And so what I plan is, when I get this thing in there, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to drop water in it, and I'm going to obviously use some sort of anti-rust cleaner or something of that nature, and just run it like that for a week or a month or something like that, obviously in the summer so it doesn't freeze, and get this thing really cleaned out before I start adding any kind of, actual engine coolant. So I'm going to make this video is getting long, so I'm going to make this stop right here. But like and subscribe, come back for more. I'm going to have more for you. But this is part 1 of the Junkyard Dawg 302. And I hope you follow along. Again, share it with people, that might be considering doing something like this. Just so that they know that it doesn't always have to be a crate engine, right? It doesn't always have to be absolutely brand new. I really believe, and I will share that experience and that story next video, and I'll try to make this much shorter so that this dragged on and on and on. But anyway, I will just say that I have done a junkyard engine before that is actually is worse than this, okay? And I'll explain that in the next video. So it can be done. There are some drawbacks, but at the same time, I think this one here is going to work out just fine. So again, like, subscribe, come back. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.